All right, so we're going to get started with chapter 14, which is one of my favorite chapters, the brain. Okay, so let's get started a little bit with a discussion to introduce our brain. So, the first couple slides are just some things that are kind of interesting. First of all, the brain needs a lot of blood, so it's supplied with blood from the heart, with our carotid arteries that then branch to vertebral arteries. And then we have a set of arteries that wrap around our brainstem and then feed up into the brain called the circle of Willis. Now, the blood vessels in the brain, they will be on the surface and they come up and they kind of wrap around the brain between the brain itself and the skull. The brain is a really needy organ. It uses 20% of all of our body's oxygen and glucose. So it's really using a lot. It needs a lot of oxygen and glucose to keep functioning. So what's really interesting is when you are using a certain part of your brain, let's say you're really concentrating or something, you will increase blood flow to that area of your brain. And deprivation of oxygen for as little as 4 minutes can permanently injure the brain. Now, we all know of examples where, like, a kid falls through the ice and is trapped under the water for 30 minutes, and then they rescue them and they'll make a full recovery. But it takes as little as 4 minutes to do irreversible damage to the brain. What happens is lysosomes in the brain cells release enzymes that start breaking down tissue. Okay, and then don't forget that we have this barrier between the brain and the rest of the body called the blood-brain barrier, and it's made by astrocytes. Remember, we talked about that in chapter 12. So astrocytes form this blood-brain barrier. What they do is they prevent certain substances from moving over from our blood flow into the brain and spinal cord. So it says it protects the cells from some toxins, that it forms a tight seal between the brain and the rest of the body. Now, this is not always the case as far as allowing or blocking all substances. It does allow some things through, like alcohol. So alcohol is one of those things that will move through this blood-brain barrier. Okay, so to start with, I want to talk about the different parts of the brain. So remember that the brain and the spinal cord make up the central nervous system. It's important to understand that anything coming off of the brain. So in lab, we're going to be learning some of these cranial nerves. These cranial nerves, like our olfactory nerve and the optic nerve, the trigeminal nerve, these nerves are not part of the brain. They are part of the peripheral nervous system. Now it says the brain, I love this slide because it says the brain is part of the central nervous system. Then it says it controls many of the body's functions. All right, if we're struggling with understanding this at this point in the class, we're in trouble. So hopefully you understand that the brain is a primary source of controlling your body. It says it's much like a computer, but more. I mean, just think about how much more your brain does than a computer. So, like a computer, I've got several programs open right now to record this video. I've got my OBS program opened up. I've got a PowerPoint program opened up. I've got a couple pictures opened up. I've got my doc cam opened up. So the computer is doing a lot of different things. However, just think about what your brain is doing. Your brain, that was my phone, sorry. I just lost all track. Anyway, so your brain is doing all sorts of different things all at once. It's regulating things like your heart, your blood pressure, your respiration. It is controlling hormones. You are thinking about what I'm talking about, but you're also thinking about things that you need to do later today. You are moving your body. You have autonomic and somatic responses going to and from your brain all the time. So it's like having 1,000 computer programs open all at once. So your brain is like a computer, but much more. I mean, that's why it says that. I think that's kind of funny, but it's very, very true. Okay. So next it says we have 4 major parts of the brain. Now, these 4 major parts of the brain are what we're going to focus on throughout this chapter. So in lab, we really talk about all of these 4, but this first one, the brainstem, isn't named specifically, but it contains the midbrain and the medulla oblongata and the pons. So we have 4 parts of the brain. Brainstem with those 3 areas, the cerebellum, the diencephalon, and the cerebrum. And then we've got these cranial nerves that are coming off of the brain, like our olfactory and our optic nerve and our trigeminal nerve. And we'll talk a little bit about those as we go along as well. Okay, so for this first video, I want to focus on the brainstem, and then I'll use different videos like I have before with handouts, but I'll try and incorporate them into these 4 parts. So the first part of our brain is the brainstem. It says it connects the spinal cord to the brain itself, and it's made up of 3 parts: the medulla oblongata, the pons, and then the top of it is called the midbrain. Hopefully you're learning this in lab and you're studying lab a little bit so you can kind of identify these parts and pieces. But if you look at this picture here, our spinal cord's down here. Then this first area of our brainstem is the medulla oblongata. Then this lump is the pons. And then right above it, right here where my blue circle is, that's all midbrain. Now, the brainstem is going to be doing a lot of autonomic stuff. You aren't doing any conscious control with your midbrain. So, for example, let's look at the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata is that smaller swelling that's below the pons. But the medulla oblongata is a big regulation center. We talked about this a little bit in some other chapters, but the medulla oblongata is going to be regulating things like your heart rate, so we can speed up and slow down our heart. Remember, it has that area, we talked about it in the heart chapter, it has that area called the cardiovascular center, and that is going to send signals to speed up your heart via the cardiac accelerator nerve, and then we can send signals back through the vagus nerve to slow the heart down via the medulla oblongata. It also controls things like our blood vessel diameter. It has a respiration center that controls respiration. It also does some secondary control. It controls swallowing, vomiting, hiccuping, coughing, and sneezing. So you can kind of see what kind of question I'm going to have on the test. Which of the following is not a function of the medulla oblongata? And I'll have 3 of these and then a 4th answer that doesn't fit. Now the pons is also an autonomic control center. It's going to be involved in your sleep cycles. So information about your sleep and wake cycle is going to be in the pons. But it also, like the medulla oblongata, has a respiration center. So it can speed up, slow down your respiration, control your breathing. The midbrain, it says it's an integral part of our auditory pathway, so our hearing pathway. So the information coming from your ears is going to go through the midbrain on its way to the rest of your brain. It contains a section called the corpora quadrigemina, and this is the midbrain right here, and these four little lumps on the back of the midbrain. This is the back of the brain, this is the front of the brain. These four little lumps are called the corpora quadrigemina, and they contain these structures called colliculi. These little bumps are colliculi, and there are two upper ones and there are two lower ones. The upper ones are called superior colliculi. The bottom ones are inferior colliculi. These are going to be involved in auditory and visual reflexes. So we talked about spinal reflexes in the last chapter, and spinal reflexes are going to be things like pain and homeostatic balance kind of reflexes. Well, these colliculi are going to be reflexes that you are receiving from your eyes and your ears. So if you are flinching, for example, let's say a ball is like coming at your head and you flinch like this, that's your corpora quadrigemina. So the superior colliculi, those balls on top, are going to be controlling your visual reflexes. So when you flinch and try and move away from something, that's a reflex from that area. The inferior colliculi are auditory reflexes where, let's say, a big crash occurs in the next room, a bunch of books fall off a bookcase, and you flinch because of that loud noise. That is the auditory reflex, and that's in your inferior colliculi. All right, so here's an example of this. Here's good old Tiger Woods, and he's hitting a golf ball, and it looks like the cameraman is in the wrong spot. Looks like the cameraman should be in a better area. Actually, the cameraman's where he should be. Tiger Woods is hitting this ball in the wrong direction, so this ball is flying right at the cameraman. Now, the cameraman is going to invoke his visual reflexes as this ball's, flying towards his head, and this picture kind of went viral. I love this picture, that's why I posted it. But the cameraman is having his visual reflexes occur here, but this is when Tiger Woods was in the middle of his scandal, his sex scandal. And so he was really struggling playing and everything. And this picture went viral because of this guy right here. So this guy right here, look, everyone looks very concerned. Look at this. Like, they're all really concerned about the shot. I don't know if they're worried because Tiger flubbed the shot or because the cameraman's about to get beamed in the head. But at any rate, everyone looks really concerned except for this guy. And he is very excited about it. And they dubbed him Cigar Man because he's got a cigar. But someone took the time to Photoshop this guy's head onto everyone's body in the picture. And this became kind of a famous picture for a short period of time during poor Tiger's sex scandal. All right. So there he is right there, that guy. All right. So that takes care of the brain stem. And so you need to know the functions of these different parts and pieces. We're going to move on to the cerebellum in the next video.